Thanks for tuning in. For those that this may be your first episode, we appreciate you checking us out. Those have been rocking with us for a while. We thank you as well. We're going to talk about friends. We tackle a lot of different areas, but some of those are we define what friendship is. We talk about different levels, the importance of just reevaluating friendships over time and understanding that friendships are fluid. So you may not have the same level of friendship as you move throughout your life. I invite you, if you can, please just like us, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, searching Marriage is Tougher, or you can hit marriageisttougher.com if you have any questions or you want to be a guest.
So keep listening for the full conversation. So we were having a conversation earlier, and we thought that it might be pertinent to bring our listeners into our minds as we were talking about the topic of friends. And defining friends, number one, but also bringing that into relation to our marriages, how that can affect our marriages, right? But, what brought this topic about was, we are fortunate friends to live in different states and be able to regularly talk to each other in the amount of depth that we do, right? You listen to us talk about our marriages often, but I'll call it off air, when we're not recording, we catch up every week, talk about our lives over the week, wins, losses, and everything in between. And then even when we end our conversations, if the time permits, we'll talk even further, right? And so we were, I guess, being intentional about thanking each other for each other's friendship and the time that we're able to spend together. Which brings in the point of being intentional about maintaining your friendships, right? But with all that said, I'll ask you, how do you define a friend or friendship?
You're going to start with that?
Yeah.
It's deep, first of all.
Yeah.
Second of all, I would say a friend is someone that knows you can confide in, and will push back on all of your dumbness or when you're not being straight, but is also available and there for you in whatever capacity they can be, or whatever capacity you need them to be. And they're loyal. They're not going to give up on you just because something doesn't go their way, or you say something that they say something you don't want to hear, or vice versa. But there's usually a history there that allows that loyalty to flourish. So I think I'll stop there, but I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, that's good, man. I mean, I think what I would stick on there is the loyalty part, right? We don't expect a friend to turn on us in a moment's notice, right? Or more specifically, what I was going to talk about is, not being there. So a friend is someone who's going to be there for you. And it's almost like an unspoken agreement that, like, if I call on you because I'm in need, that you be there. There was a person who I would, all right, so here's the part about it. If there was someone in your life that you previously called a friend, it may hurt to no longer call them a friend.
Correct.
Right. And do that intentionally, because that's just what the status is now. Right. It doesn't mean that it can't be recovered. Doesn't mean that status can't change, but you are where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself specifically defining my relationships with people as either a friend or whatever else the status may be. Um, but this particular relationship changed in the moment when my mother first had her or had her first scare with the prospect of death.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, I think at that point she had a stroke, and that's when her illness became very real for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously I knew about it and all those things, but like the prospect of her not being here anymore became very real in that moment. So I was struggling with it, and I called this guy up and I was like, "Hey man, can you come over to this restaurant? I just need somebody to lean on, talk through this, da da da." Right. And like he had to think about it. You know what I mean? Because I told him what was going on.
Mm.
And I didn't just say, "Hey, come over to the restaurant." I was like, "Hey, here's what's going on. Da, da, da. I can you be here for me?" And he was like, um, right. And I could see him struggling with like whether or not he had the money to come to a restaurant or whatever. With that, I even offered. I was like, "Don't worry about the money. I've got it. I'll pay for whatever we consume. Right? Just come." And it wasn't that far away. It was like 10 minutes away from his house,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't show up for me. Yeah. So
So you can't just drop that story. Like, I'm sad and enraged at this same time.
yeah, I was really tight.
So I'm like, yo, like, all right, carry on. I'm gonna compose myself.
Yeah, so I was upset. I will tell you that we didn't talk for a while after that. And I don't even think I broached the topic with him for probably a good year and a half after that. Oh, like why we just stopped talking. Um, and I think it was more or less that if I'm calling him my friend, that I had this expectation that he would show up for me in a specifically in a scenario like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the worst part about it for me was that he wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting on the couch and told me that. So it was more or less just a choice to say like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good on that one. And in hindsight, maybe he wasn't prepared to be there for me in that way, which I could understand. Um, but I don't necessarily know that I needed him to like talk me through what I was going through. It was more or less I just needed company at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But these are the things that we go through in life as men, and that we learn as we go through life as men. Who truly are your friends, and who of these friends affect your marriage in a positive manner. And I think that's something that we definitely need to be mindful of as husbands, right? Do we have friends that our wives don't approve of?
Mm.
And
Wow.
if that's the case, how does that affect your marriage? Should you actually call that person your friend? Are they more of an acquaintance? Um, but I think, where I expected this conversation to go mostly is the importance also of having friends. I don't know if I'm going to say this the right way. I want to say having friends outside of your marriage, right? Like people you can go to and have difficult conversations or have support you in difficult scenarios. Um, they may or may not speak into your marriage, depending on whether you allow that. Um, but having that base of support outside of your wife as a person.
No, that all makes sense. What you so one of my uh so we talk about friends and labels. So as maybe it's just a black community thing, when you pick up on people younger than you, they may call you uncle or auntie if it's wife, or like that's my nephew, whatever. So
Yeah.
but so all that to say, my nephew, he actually does check-ins. I think he started this probably 2 years ago, maybe when he I don't know where it came up, but he has like he calls them, I want to check in so that we can have our contract. So he has like friendship contract conversations. So as life changes, he talks with his friends. He talks with my wife and I about like what he needs and what's expected. And I thought about that when you talked about your former friend, um, as you had expectations for what you thought your friendship was, but he didn't meet those expectations. So, not to say that everyone has to do that, but that triggered my mind like, man, like if you guys had a conversation, like every year or so, or every time something changed, like then you wouldn't have been let down, or he would have known what was expected of him to rise in that moment.
Right.
And that's a very mature, and it can almost be sterile type of thing. Like if you're like, okay, this is it, this is what I need, what do you need, blah blah blah. But because one of the things when I was describing friendship, you're like it was almost unspoken,
Mm-hmm.
which we can think gives it authenticity, but at the same time, it can leave for situations like that, for being hurt or being expectation not being met. Um, so I would say maybe consider that, especially with those people you consider your closest friends, not just, random people you may go to the bar with or whatever, but like people that you think you can call on at any moment. I think maybe you have those conversations, um, because contracts can change. You can between different life circumstances, and even that, like I understand if someone has a newborn, I'm not going to call them at 2 in the morning, even though they probably will be up, but I'm not, I'm going to allow them to be there to get it for 1 second. They're in their 30 minutes of sleep window. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to be the person to call them at that time. Right. So there's certain life situations where you can or cannot, or you should or shouldn't. But at the same time, if I'm in a pinch and I know they're the only person that can blah, 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 and they're on that level of friendship, then I'm going to call them because they would be upset if they knew that I needed them and they were a resource and I didn't call them because of
Mm-hmm.
the relationship we have. So friendship is nuanced, but the more
Yes.
you can communicate what's expected, the more you can mitigate um, letdowns and frustrations.
Yeah. That's funny. That'll put into perspective how people view you as a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had this conversation the other day with who I'll call a buddy of mine who said his girlfriend had the potential to go back to an old job. They are feeling the pain of losing her now and are basically offering her a very significant raise. And and that's even a raise to the position that she has now at her new company, right? And really the only reason she left is because that business was leaving the area that she lives in. And she, I think, at the start of it was willing to make that travel, but they weren't willing to pay her enough to make that feasible. So
Mm-hmm.
now job has no stress, loving life, making buku bucks. And then now her old managers are texting her like, please come back, you know, what kind of number do we need to pay you in order to make this happen? Then she threw out a number, right? Just that is more than what she's currently making. And I felt like they didn't really put a lot of thought behind it. And I was like, oh, you should reach out to me. I could have walked you through
Mm-hmm.
this specifically. This is what I do.
Right.
And they didn't. But like that puts into perspective for you how someone might view you. Right. And that I don't want to put too much weight on it because that wasn't a situation that needed to involve me.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion that they should have
Right,
called.
right, right.
But in that moment, as they're sending text back and forth, like, why should they think of me? Right?
Yeah,
That's
right,
or narcissistic of me to have that thought.
right, right.
I'm admit. I'm just saying, like, they know that that area of operations is in my wheelhouse, and I was like, you not should have, could have
Mm-hmm.
reached is probably the better way to put that. But yeah, man, like you said, having these conversations and interactions can really put into perspective what relationships actually are. Um, and I had this thought of how many of these relationships do we pursue too far, right? Like, say there is a scenario that happens, like even just the one that I was talking about, or the one with my mother being sick.
Mm-hmm.
What do I look like if my desire is to make that a true friendship when I already realize and have been presented evidence that that's probably not going to be a thing, right? And so that goes
Yeah.
into the ability of whose responsibility is it to maintain these relationships.
I mean, I think it's just it's both parties' responsibility, but you also have to be responsible with that responsibility, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
understand it is what it is, and you have to be okay with letting it be that. If someone shows you where they are, that's where it is. I mean, you're welcome to give them another chance should you deem that that's warranted. Um, but at the same time, you can only expect with what people have given you, and you can only
hmm,
go with that. So once they show you who they are or where they think your friendship is, you have to be okay to leave it there.
yeah,
So, and I think bringing that back around to your marriage, right? Like if you are pursuing these relationships that are constantly giving you um, let down expectations,
hmm,
you're kind of bringing because you're going to carry that into the relationship with your wife, and that's not what your friendship should do. They should add value instead of having you bring um, heavy weight to it. And obviously not every friend is going to do everything 100% right that you're going to feel is great all the time, but I'm saying if you're habitually chasing these relationships that are going too far, that will then become an issue.
yeah. That's good, man. That's I don't know that I really thought about it in that way. How a negatively impactful friendship could impact your marriage, right? I think when I was talking about the impact of a friendship on a marriage, I was only thinking of the positive way
Mm-hmm.
that marriage, but there's so much weight held in how we walk back through the door when we've had a bad day or something goes wrong. If you're putting a lot of weight in a friendship that goes wrong and you bring that back into your marriage, that's crazy. Is there any validity in your wife's approval of which friends you carry?
I think there's always validity when it comes to your spouse.
Hmm.
Um, because almost like we were just talking about. Like if when you go out or hang out or talk to this friend and your wife thinks that they make dodgy decisions or whatever it is that she doesn't approve of, when you're with them, she's going to be holding that stress. And when you come back, there could be stress there. And if by some unfortunate reason something happens with that said friend that is unfavorable for you physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, that's not, to me, I'll just speak for me, that's not worth what it would do to your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Even if it's only for like a 2 hour discussion of, I told you this friend was no good. I can't believe that you did this, blah, blah, blah. But underlying those 2 hours of that conversation, there could be the question, he doesn't trust my judgment. Like, I saw this before he did. Like, why didn't he believe me? Why didn't he trust me? Now look what happened. Now there's fallout. Like, to me, there's too much that could be for the sake of a hangout or whatever. I don't know because I don't have any friends that are unapproved of or something of that nature. So it's
Right.
hard for me to speak from that place. So I'm speaking from a place of theory, not from a place of actually, history. So, um, but that's all I can. But I have seen that happen. I've had that seen that be with coaching couples. Like it is a stressor. Um, and to me, it's not worth having that stress. But some people think that friendship is worth it.
Yeah, which is strange because it says a lot about you or what you may think of your marriage if you're willing to put or prioritize that friendship above your wife, because that's ultimately what you're saying, right?
Yes, but most either husbands or wives if with that have spouses that don't approve of their friends, there's something about that friendship that makes them question it, like makes them choose it. And it's different things for different people. Always under I don't always agree with it, but I can understand if it's something that they feel that they haven't got to with their marriage or their spouse doesn't offer or something like that. But that's a whole nother discussion, right? That's, you got
Right.
to communicate, get together, blah, blah, blah. You should work towards it. But it's like, do you even want to at that point?
Yeah. And for some reason, I just started thinking about the health of a marriage and the need for, like, for my marriage's sake, right? We've got mutual friends and then we've got individual friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and just being mindful of what that combination or how that combination works within your marriage to, I guess just for health's sake.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, you can't have all mutual friends
Right.
because that's not going to work. And you can't have all individual friends. There has to
Yeah.
be a balance. Um, but I think it's, when we talk about friends, we have to address that, and we kind of did a little bit, just the fluidity of friendship.
Hmm.
And again, I'm just going to say it because I know sometimes we have a hard time of letting friendships be what they were and not force them to be what you need them to be right now, right?
Yeah.
Because there are people that were high school friends, there are people that were your young adult friends. As you progress through life, you have high school, young adult, college years per se, if you say that. Then you have, if you're single after that, and then you have your married friends that you got when you're married, then you have your friends as you continue to progress. And it's hard to make new friends as you're an adult, but it can also be unrealistic to think you're going to hold on to every friend that you've ever known forever,
Yeah.
because you just don't have the capacity to do that. Right. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's a Aristotle quote that says, a friend to all is a friend to none. Right. So if you think about, if you held every friend that you've ever had, you wouldn't be able to be a good friend, because friendship takes capacity,
Yeah.
it takes intentionality, it takes resources, time, money, um, all those things. So you physically don't have the ability to be a solid friend to a lot of different people.
Yeah. Imagine how many more weddings you'd have to
Bro, no,
pay.
I don't want to.
I'm done. I can't. I don't have that much money. I'm good on weddings.
So I know, I think we're coming up on time,
Yeah, we're over.
but I did want to talk about, just in that vein, like, I think it's important to talk about either the naming convention of friend and like their different levels of friendship, right?
Hmm.
So for me, it's like, you have the people that you could call, and 100% of the time in a need, they'd be there, right?
Hmm.
Then you have people that maybe, 50% to 75% be there, whether it depends on what it is or depends on what they have going on. And then you have people that, like, you wouldn't even call, but they're cool to hang out with, and you have good conversation. Even they're confidential with whatever you have, whatever conversations you have, like, that's value add. But so for me, there's different levels of friendships, or you may even say, like, that's my friend, or then it'd be like, that's my buddy, that's my dude, that's someone I kick it with, that's an acquaintance, that's a coworker. Like, I'm not gonna put a friendship label on like a coworker relationship, those type of things. But obviously your coworker can become your friend if you
Right.
guys pour into and you do that. So I think it's important to talk through those, and that's how I kind of categorize. Do you have any way that you kind of in your head, not place people, but understand where they are, as
Yeah.
far as relationships go?
First off, you said it right by place people. Um, and really only because I'm intentional, so intentional about how I refer to people as whether they're a friend or not. And if you don't fall in that first category, I cannot consider you a friend. Buddy might be a more applicable word, and certainly acquaintance. Um, and you know what? It's funny. I don't find difficulty in gaining friends, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but I do find difficulty. Well, no, that's wrong. Let me back up on that one. By the definition of friend that we're using, you are correct in saying that it is difficult to find those types of people that are willing to pour equally into the relationship. I don't find it difficult to find either acquaintances or buddies, as it was said, um, because that can be maintained if you're willing to do most of the pouring,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like in my situation, I'm willing to show up to certain places more times than they're willing to show up for me.
Right.
Um, but that's just who I am, right? It's not out of a, a need to be around those people. I may just enjoy their company. And if I have the time, then I don't mind spending it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got a little off track, so I don't know where I was going with that, but um,
I'd asked you about, how do you place people and like
oh,
the levels, or is there anything else you would add?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'll just stay on that. Um, I do place people I'm very intentional about that. And I think because of who I am and because I'm so willing to pour into people or pour into relationships for myself and for my sanity, I have to place people.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, I'd have nothing left for myself or my family. So there's that.
That's it. I think it's good to be, and it's good to just think about your relationships, your friendships, and evaluate them for what they are.
Mhm.
And that will help you be a better person, understand who you can call on, and um, know who will be there for you and your family.
Yeah. So, guys, let us know how you define friend. Hop over to Instagram, searching "Marriage is Tougher," and we can continue this conversation there. But I am truly interested in how you define friend and how much thought you put into, uh, really separating or placing, as I said, who your friends actually are compared to a buddy, compared to an acquaintance. Beyond that, you can reach out to us if you'd like to be a guest on marriageistuffer.com, or also ask us any question you would like um, in any of these places: Instagram, marriageistuffer.com, and Facebook. But outside of that, we'll catch up with you next time.
So, yeah.